We all know that Mecca is one of the oldest and most sacred cities in the world, a place where history and faith intertwine. But have you ever wondered what it would feel like to wake up there in the year 610, centuries before modern streets, electricity, or cars? Imagine the warm desert sun brushing against your skin, the scent of sand and spices filling the air, and the quiet hum of a city just beginning its day. Traders prepare their goods, children chase chickens, and every step you take connects you to a world untouched by modern life. The soft glow of dawn presses gently against your closed eyes, warm but not sharp, like a comforting hand easing you from sleep. When you open them, the world that greets you is not the familiar ceiling of your home, nor the hum of distant engines or city noise. Instead, you find yourself lying on a simple straw mat, its fibers rough but earthy beneath you. A woven roof of palm trunks shields the room, allowing thin strands of sunlight to slip through and flicker like gold dust in the air. The scent of desert wind drifts through a narrow window, dry, warm, tinged with spices you cannot name. You sit up slowly, feeling the silence of early morning wrap around you. There is no electricity, no steady hum of machines, no artificial glow. Only the quiet rustle of cloth, the faint crackle of last night's embers, and the soft shift of sand somewhere outside. You touch the mat, the clay walls, the smooth wooden bowl beside you, all real, all ancient. For a moment, you wonder if you're still dreaming, suspended between your own world and this one. But the warmth on your skin is too steady, the sounds too precise, the air too textured with life. Through the window comes the distant murmur of voices, soft at first, then swelling with purpose. Men calling to one another, animals shifting their weight, the bark of a trader preparing his goods. You hear metal clink, pottery move, and the steady, rhythmic beat of hands kneading dough. Morning in Mecca has begun. It is not rushed, not chaotic, but carried by a steady discipline shaped by survival in the desert. Everything seems older here, crafted with intention, built from generations who learned how to live between scorching days and freezing nights. You rise and steady yourself, realizing how quiet your thoughts become in this place. Even the air seems to listen. As you step toward the doorway, the rough cloth hanging there sways gently, as if inviting you into a world that existed long before your modern concerns ever mattered. The floor beneath your feet is cool, packed earth, smooth from years of footsteps. You push aside the cloth and step into the early light. Outside, the sky spreads in soft shades of rose and pale gold. The sun is still low, climbing slowly behind distant hills. Narrow pathways weave between small homes made of mud brick and stone. Goats bleat somewhere nearby. A woman carries a jar of water balanced effortlessly on her shoulder. A young boy rushes past, chasing a chicken, laughing breathlessly as he stumbles into the sand. Everything feels simple yet full, alive in ways that require no noise, no urgency. You walk a few steps and pause, taking in the landscape. The city is modest, built in layers of earth tones, as if grown directly from the desert itself. But it has a quiet strength. a sense of being held together by something deeper than stone or clay. You breathe in, and the air tastes faintly of dates, dust, and wood smoke. A man passes you leading a camel, its heavy steps pressing deep prints into the sand. He nods politely. Behind him, two women walk together, speaking softly as they carry freshly woven cloth. Traders shout greetings to one another, preparing for another day of exchange. Goods from Yemen, spices from Abyssinia, silk from lands you've only read about. Their voices rise like a morning chorus, full of energy and intention. It is then, standing in this ancient sunrise, that you feel it, an awareness settling into your bones. This world is older, quieter, and deeper than anything you've ever known. It holds secrets shaped over centuries. It carries stories through wind and sand. It moves at a rhythm untouched by modern hands. And something inside you shifts, as if aligning with the heartbeat of a time long buried beneath your own. Drawn by curiosity, you step forward. The roads widen as the city awakens fully. The sounds grow richer, layered with movement and purpose. Somewhere ahead, a cluster of voices rises louder than the rest, echoing, calling, inviting. You feel yourself pulled toward that vibrant hum, toward the center where the city breathes its fullest. The closer you walk toward the center of the city, the louder the world becomes, layer upon layer of sound folding into one another until the air itself seems to tremble with activity. The narrow paths open slowly into a broad stretch of space, and suddenly, you find yourself standing at the edge of Mecca's Suq, the bustling heart of daily life. For a moment, all you can do is stare. Colors flare across your vision: deep red textiles, indigo-dyed cloth, gleaming bronze bowls, baskets overflowing with dates, figs, and pomegranates. Spices spill from clay jars in vibrant mounds. Saffron, like bright sunlight, cinnamon, like curled bark, and black seeds shimmering like obsidian dust. The scents mix and drift through the air in warm, fragrant waves, making the entire market feel alive, breathing, shifting. Voices rise and fall like the tide. Merchants call out their prices with booming confidence, waving customers closer. Women haggle with practiced intensity, their words sharp but respectful. A boy announces fresh water from Zamzam with a voice that cracks but does not quit. Camels groan under the weight of goods, their handlers tugging them gently but firmly into place. Goats bleat, chickens flutter, children laugh as they weave through grown-ups, playing games between stalls as if the market itself were one giant playground. Everywhere you look, something new pulls your attention. A metalsmith hammers a strip of glowing iron, sparks snapping in the air. A perfume seller lifts a tiny glass vial to your nose, offering a fragrance so rich and floral it sends a shiver down your spine. Two elders sit beneath a canopy, arguing animatedly about the quality of Yemeni incense. A storyteller gestures with grand sweeps of his arms as a small crowd gathers around him, hanging on to every word. It is overwhelming, but in a way that feels strangely comforting, like stepping into a river whose current is strong, but not unkind. You let yourself be carried by the flow, drifting from one vibrant scene to another. The ground beneath your feet is warm but firm, packed down by generations of footsteps. Each stall seems to hold a universe of its own, shaped by the hands and stories of the people who built it. As you walk, you notice how the marketplace is not only a center of trade, but a center of connection. Every greeting, every negotiation, every shared laugh feels like a thread weaving the community together. The SUQ hums with a kind of unity, one that is loud, imperfect, deeply human. And even though this world is ancient, something about it feels familiar, as if you are remembering rather than discovering. Still, your modern mind struggles to make sense of the sheer volume of activity. The rules here are different, unspoken, yet understood by everyone except you. The currency, the customs, even the gestures people use while haggling, they move too quickly to follow. For a moment, you stand frozen, turning your head from one lively corner to another, unsure where to focus. A deep laugh sounds behind you, warm and amused, not mocking, but knowing. You turn to see a tall man with sun-bronzed skin, a neatly wrapped turban, and a robe that carries the dust of long travel. He stands beside a heavily loaded camel, its packs bulging with cloth, spices, and tools from distant lands. His eyes glint with friendliness as he watches you struggle to take everything in. "You look like someone seeing the world for the first time," he says, his voice steady and rich with miles traveled. The SUQ can swallow you whole if you don't know how to read it. You smile awkwardly, still caught between awe and confusion. He gestures upward, toward a rocky rise overlooking the city. "Come." From higher ground, the market makes more sense. You see where the caravans come in, where the tribes gather, how Mecca breathes. There is no hesitation in his tone, only invitation. And though the market calls to you with its colors and noise, something about his offer feels right. A guide, a clearer view, a chance to understand the living heart of this ancient city. You nod, and he motions for you to follow him. The climb is short, but each step lifts you farther from the clamor of the marketplace and into a quieter vantage point where Mecca stretches out beneath the morning sun. The caravan leader walks with a steady pace, clearly accustomed to desert paths. When the two of you reach a ledge of rock shaped smooth by wind, he turns and gestures broadly toward the city below and the vast expanse beyond it. "This," he says, "is the crossroads of the Red Sands. Everything that moves through Arabia passes near here sooner or later. From this height, the market looks like a single pulsing organism. Tents sprout like colorful shells. Merchants shift in waves, and thin trails of smoke curl upwards from cook fires. But beyond its borders, you notice something you hadn't seen before. Long, winding paths leading into the desert, faint but unmistakable. The arteries of trade. The leader kneels and draws lines in the sand with a practiced finger. To the south, Yemen. To the north, Syria. To the east, Persia. To the west, the the Red Sea. He dots the paths with small pebbles. And Mecca sits in the center like a heart. The caravans bring life to it. As he speaks, the desert around you changes. You start to notice distant silhouettes, camels moving in long files, dust rising in shimmering columns, traders guiding their goods with patience learned from generations. The leader explains how these caravans travel for weeks at a time, carrying incense, spices, leather, cloth, metals, and stories from far-off lands. It is not the goods that keep the desert alive, he says, but the relationships. Tribes depend on one another. Without alliances, no caravan survives. His eyes harden slightly as he adds, bandits watch from the hills. Storms erase trails. Wells can run dry. A caravan without trust is a caravan buried as sand. You listen, absorbing the gravity in his voice. There is pride there. Pride in endurance, in tradition, in the delicate balance that allows life to move across endless dunes. He tells you of the long route north to Syria, where traders face bitter cold nights and steep rocky valleys. He recounts journeys south to Yemen, blessed with rainfall and lush greenery, but vulnerable to tribal conflicts. Every direction holds both promise and danger. And yet, he continues, men return to the desert again and again because the desert remembers. It rewards those who treat it with respect and destroys those who don't. There is a reverence in the way he speaks, as though the desert itself is ancient and alive. A breeze passes over the ridge, warm and dry. You look outward and imagine yourself on one of those journeys. Long days under the blazing sun, nights beneath a sky full of cold stars, the steady sway of the camel beneath you, and the silence of miles stretching like an ocean of sand. You picture the camaraderie of travel, the shared meals, the dangers, the triumphs, and suddenly, the world you're standing in feels even larger than before. Vast, interconnected, far from the simplicity you imagined ancient life to hold. The caravan leader reaches into a leather pouch and takes a sip of water, then offers you some. You drink gratefully, the coolness a welcome contrast to the heat building around you. You have the look of someone searching for understanding, he says, with a knowing smile. Mecca has many teachers, but not all speak with their tongues. Some speak through their actions. Before you can ask what he means, footsteps crunch behind you. A small group of travelers approaches, men draped in light robes, carrying packs and water skins. They greet the leader warmly, then turn toward you with curiosity. One of them offers you a goat skin filled with a sweet, refreshing drink. You accept, feeling the chilled liquid coat your throat. As they rest, the men exchange stories of their recent journey, narrow escapes, friendly tribes, and long stretches of peaceful travel. One of them leans closer to you and lowers his voice just enough to imply importance. If you wish to understand this city deeply, he says, ask about the man called Al-Amin. The others nod, their expressions shifting into quiet respect. Honesty like his, another adds, shapes more than trade. The name lingers in the air, Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. Intrigued, you wonder who this man is, and why so many speak of him with such certainty. Descending from the ridge, with the caravan leader's words still echoing in your mind, you find yourself walking once more through Mecca's sandy pathways. But this time, you see the city differently. The noise, the movement, the faces, they no longer blur together. Instead, you begin to notice patterns, invisible lines of connection woven through every interaction. Mecca is not just a city of trade, it is a city of clans. And clans, you soon realize, are the quiet engines powering everything. As you move deeper into its neighborhoods, you notice how people group themselves. Men speak with certain men. Women greet certain women. Families gather with those who share familiar markings and gestures. Names here are more than names. They are declarations of lineage, honor, and responsibility. Every tribe carries its own history, and every clan its own stories of triumph and conflict. The way someone ties their headcloth or the shape of their home's doorway can reveal their ancestry. You pass a group of youth practicing with short wooden sticks, imitating the confident stances of their elders. Their laughter fills the air, but their movements carry discipline. An older man watches them from the shade, correcting their footwork with pride. You realize training is more than a pastime. It is a way of preserving the strength and dignity of one's people. Even the smallest gestures hold meaning here. Further ahead, two merchants negotiate loudly over a shipment of cloth. You might assume they are angry, but their eyes carry familiarity rather than hostility. Their loud voices are simply part of the dance, each representing the interests of their clan. Neither wants to lose face, but neither wants to break trust. This is how balance is kept, assertiveness tempered by an unspoken code of mutual respect. A woman handing water to a tired traveler tells you, to understand Mecca, you must understand its clans. Without them, the city would fall apart. Her tone is warm but firm. She speaks as if giving you a key to decode the world around you. As you walk, you begin to recognize the signs, the proud confidence of Quraysh nobles, the dignified grace of smaller tribal groups, the subtle alliances that shift depending on the time of day or topic at hand. Even children seem to know where they belong. And yet, despite the complexities, there is a strange unity beneath it all, as if these clans are strands in the same rope, sometimes pulling apart, sometimes tightening, but always tied to one another. You notice small shrines and meeting spots where men gather to discuss matters of honor, trade, and protection. Conflicts are resolved with care, for reputation is fragile and must be guarded like treasure. A person's word is their currency. Trust is their wealth. A single act of betrayal can ripple through generations. As you're absorbing all this, a pair of merchants passing by mention a name that instantly grabs your attention: Muhammad al-Amin. They speak it with a calm certainty, like invoking a truth everyone already accepts. You hear another man reply, "A person with his honesty brings stability. Even rivals trust him." Their expressions soften slightly, carrying respect rather than hesitation. You linger for a moment, listening as they discuss a recent trade dispute he helped settle. No raised voices, no prideful quarrels, just fairness. His reputation seems to stretch across clan boundaries, rare in a society built on lineage. The more they speak, the more the name Al-Amin settles into your mind, echoing with the same quiet strength the caravansman hinted at. A man known for trustworthiness, a man who stands apart in a world defined by alliances and boundaries, someone who shapes Mecca not through force or wealth, but through character. Your curiosity rises like a tide. You step closer to the group and ask gently, Where does this Muhammad Al-Amin live? Before the men can answer, a kind-looking merchant, older, with soft eyes and dust on his robe, turns toward you. He gives a small nod, as if recognizing the sincerity behind your question. I can take you, he says. His home is not far from here. Come, walk with me. The merchant guides you through winding alleys where daylight filters softly between clay walls and wooden beams. The city hum fades gradually as you move upward, the sounds of bargaining replaced by quieter rhythms. Footsteps on packed earth, the distant bleat of a goat, the gentle clink of pottery being washed at a doorstep. Soon, the slope steepens, and homes become more spaced apart, each perched slightly above the next like steps leading toward the sky. The merchant gestures ahead. There, he says, his voice softened by respect. That is the house of Muhammad, the one people call Al-Amin. It is not a grand house, not the home of a wealthy merchant or a powerful tribal leader. Instead, it stands modestly among similar dwellings, a simple structure of stone and clay, shaded by a small wooden awning. A pot of herbs grows beside the door. A woven mat hangs neatly over the entrance. Everything is clean, orderly, unpretentious. You can feel a sense of peace radiating from its quiet presence. As you draw closer, you notice a few neighbors nearby, sweeping the ground or preparing bread. They glance at you with polite curiosity, then offer warm smiles when they see the merchant guiding you. Mecca may be divided by clans, but respect for Al-Amin seems to bridge those divides. He is not home right now, an elderly woman says as she straightens her basket of dates. Her hands are weathered, but her eyes shine brightly. He left early today, as he often does. He seeks stillness more than noise. Another neighbor, a younger man mending a rope, nods in agreement. He is a man of deep thought, quiet, gentle, fair even to those who disagree with him. You will not find anyone in this quarter with a harsh word about him. A child nearby, perhaps no more than 6 or 7, looks up eagerly. He always remembers my name, the boy says proudly, even when he is busy. The neighbors laugh softly, but their admiration feels genuine, unforced. You sense that their affection comes not from awe or fear, but from familiarity. This man is part of their daily lives. Someone who walks these same paths, who offers a patient ear, who returns greetings with sincerity rather than formality. You stand near the doorway for a moment, observing how the sunlight rests gently across the threshold. You imagine Muhammad rising before dawn, quietly tending to his family, greeting neighbors with humility, helping settle disputes with calm wisdom. The simple home seems to reflect the nature people describe: grounded, thoughtful, steady. He is someone who carries no arrogance, the elderly woman continues, leaning her weight against her cane. When he speaks with care. When he listens with his whole heart. Another man adds, people trust him not because he demands it, but because he lives honestly, even in trade, even in disagreements, he is fair. The more they speak, the clearer the portrait becomes. Al-Amin is not revered for wealth, for authority, or for dramatic achievements. He is admired for something far more rare: consistent goodness. His presence is like a calming breeze in a place where pride and rivalry often stir the air. You find yourself wishing he were home. Something about the stories, the tone of their voices, the warmth of their smiles, everything hints that meeting this man would feel significant. But instead of disappointment, a gentle curiosity settles over you, deep and steady. Sensing your interest, one of the neighbors, an older man with a kind, thoughtful gaze, steps closer. "If you wish to understand him better," he says quietly, "you must know where he spends his solitude. Not many climb that path, but the few who do speak of its silence." He raises his hand and points beyond the houses, toward a rugged mountain rising against the sky. At first, it seems ordinary, just another peak, carved by wind and time. But then you notice the small opening near its upper slope, a dark shape nestled in stone like a waiting eye. "Jabal al-Nur," he explains, "the mountain of light. And the cave he visits is called Hira. He goes there to reflect, to seek clarity of heart. If he is anywhere, he may be there." You follow his gaze, feeling the mountain's quiet gravity pull at your attention. The idea of some man retreating into solitude, seeking peace in a world of noise, feels both mysterious and deeply human. The merchant places a gentle hand on your shoulder. "If you wish to walk the path he walks, I can show you where the trail begins." The merchant's directions linger in your mind as you begin the walk toward Jabal al-Nur, the mountain of light. The city gradually falls behind you, its sounds growing fainter with every step. The air shifts, becoming drier, heavier, touched by the scent of warm stone. Before you lies a rugged slope carved by centuries of wind and footsteps. You pause at the base of the mountain, gazing upward at the narrow trail that winds like a pale thread toward the cave of Hira. The path is steep from the very beginning, and each step forces you to focus on the earth beneath your feet. The stones are sun-warmed and uneven, demanding patience. The climb is not dangerous, but it is humbling. You cannot rush it. The desert wind brushes against your face, carrying grains of sand that whisper across your skin. It is strangely comforting, as though the mountain itself acknowledges your presence. As you rise higher, Mecca unfurls below you like a tapestry. Clustered homes, dusty paths, and the distant hum of life. The higher you climb, the more muted everything becomes, swallowed by the vast silence of the mountainside. Only your breath and the occasional cry of a far-off bird accompany you. You stop to rest beneath a jagged outcrop of stone. The rock above you casts a thin strip of shade that feels like a blessing. A pair of travelers sit a few steps away, sharing dried dates and water. They nod in greeting, inviting you to join them. You walk the path many seekers have walked, one of them says, offering you a date. His voice is soft, almost reverent. This place calls only to those who need it. The other traveler gestures toward the winding trail. Men and women climb here for clarity, for for peace, for answers their hearts have held for too long. Some leave with nothing but calm. Others leave changed forever. You listen as they share stories of individuals who retreated to this mountain, not for rituals or loud declarations, but for the quiet, for the stillness that stretches like an ocean over the barren rocks. They speak of those who sought purpose, who looked for signs in the constellations overhead, who pressed their hands to the stone walls of the cave in silent prayer. One traveler leans back, gazing up at the sky. Solitude here doesn't feel empty, he says. It feels full, as if the mountain holds the echoes of everyone who ever searched for meaning. Their words settle into you, soft but weighty. You realize that your climb is not just a journey to see where Muhammad seeks solitude. It is also a journey inward, away from the noise of markets and the intricacies of clan life, away from distractions, towards something quieter, deeper, perhaps even timeless. You thank the travelers and continue upward. The sun climbs higher, spilling gold across the stones. Heat radiates from the cliffs, making the air shimmer. Yet the silence remains steady and cool in your mind. Something about this place strips away the unnecessary layers of your thoughts, leaving only what is essential. Hours pass in slow, steady steps. Occasionally, you spot small signs of those who walked before you. Smooth rocks polished by many hands. Footprints half buried in sand. Abandoned walking sticks worn by countless palms. You are not the first to walk this path, and you will not be the last. This trail is older than memory. As the sun lowers toward the horizon, the desert transforms. Shadows stretch long over the rocks, and the sky deepens into soft shades of rose and violet. The wind cools, carrying the scent of night. You pause again, breathing in the quiet. Day slips slowly into twilight, and the world around you becomes softer, almost sacred. When you finally round a bend near the upper slope, you stop abruptly. There, carved into the mountain, like a small doorway into the unknown, is the entrance to the cave of Hira. And just beside it, flickering gently against the growing darkness, is a dim light. It dances like a whisper in the wind, small yet unmistakable. Someone is there, or something is beginning. As you approach the cave, the dim light flickers once, more, then fades, as if whoever held it has gone deeper inside or extinguished it entirely. A gentle quiet settles over the mountain, vast and wide, as though the world itself is preparing for something unspoken. You stand at the cave's threshold for a moment, feeling the stillness press softly against you. It isn't eerie. It's peaceful, purposeful. The kind of silence that asks you to listen rather than fear. You choose not to enter the cave. Instead, you step a short distance away, where a small flat patch of earth sits nestled against a curtain of rocks. It is a natural resting spot, sheltered from wind yet open to the sky, a perfect place to camp for the night. You lower yourself onto the sand, its warmth lingering from the day's sun, and feel the mountain beneath you like a grounding presence. The desert night unfolds slowly around you. Stars begin to appear, one by one, each emerging clearer and sharper than any sky you have ever seen. Their brilliance rivals the faint glow of Mecca far below, its lamps flickering in small clusters like earthly constellations. The wind sighs through narrow crevices in the rocks, stirring grains of sand that shift in soft whispers. From time to time, a distant call from the city drifts upward, faint, almost dreamlike. Up here, the world feels suspended between earth and heaven. You lean back and close your eyes, letting the vastness wash over you. The air cools gradually, brushing over your skin like a quiet reminder of the desert's extremes. You wrap your arms around yourself, breathing deeply, allowing your thoughts to settle like dust after a storm. There is something comforting about the isolation, something ancient and reassuring in the way the mountain holds you. Hours pass gently. The night deepens. A soft glow of moonlight settles across the landscape, turning the rocks silver and the sand pale as bone. You begin to understand why people climb here to seek solitude. The stillness doesn't feel empty. It feels full, as though it carries the memories of everyone who came searching before you. The air is thick with unspoken stories, prayers, questions. There is also a faint sensation you cannot quite describe, as if something is stirring just beyond perception. Not a threat, not a sound, more like a shift in the atmosphere. A quiet preparation. You feel it in your chest, in the steady beating of your heart, as though the mountain is on the edge of revealing something profound. You don't know what it is, but the sensation is unmistakable. A turning point approaches. You lie down fully and watch the sky. Stars drift slowly across their celestial paths. The moon sinks toward the western horizon. The air cools further. At some point, sleep takes you, not suddenly, but gently, like a parent smoothing a blanket over a resting child. In the stillness of dreams, you sense movement, a flicker of light, a shimmer in the far-off sky. Perhaps it is only your imagination, shaped by the stories you've heard. Perhaps it is something else entirely. You cannot be certain, but the sensation stays with you, subtle, persistent, like a whisper left behind by a fading wind. Then, sometime before dawn, something changes. It begins as the faintest tremor, not in the ground, but in the air itself. A ripple of stillness, an instant of profound quiet so absolute that it startles you awake. You open your eyes to find the sky washed in deep indigo, the stars dimming as the first hints of dawn push against the darkness. The cave of Hira looms quietly nearby, shrouded in shadow. The tremor doesn't return. The world remains still. Yet the feeling lingers, powerful and undeniable. The mountain is holding its breath. You sit upright, your heart steady but alert, sensing the edge of something immense. Something that has been building through centuries of silence. The pale blue of early dawn washes over the mountain, soft and gentle, as if the sky itself hesitates to disturb the silence that has settled around you. The faint tremor you felt moments ago leaves a lingering awareness in your chest, an instinctive feeling that something unseen has shifted. The cave of Hira stands before you, dark against the lightening sky. its narrow entrance shaped like a doorway between two worlds. Drawn by a quiet pull you cannot explain, you rise from your resting place and make your way toward the cave. Each step feels deliberate, softened by reverence rather than caution. The air grows cooler as you enter the mouth of the rocky passage. The walls are rough, shaped by ages of wind and heat, and they cradle the space with a kind of ancient gentleness. Shadows melt backward as you advance a few more paces, letting your eyes adjust to the dim interior. Inside, the cave is smaller than you expected, humble, almost austere. The floor is uneven, but worn smooth in places where countless feet have knelt, sat, or rested. You lower yourself to the ground, feeling the stone beneath you, cool and grounding. A hush settles over the space. It is not an empty silence, not the absence of sound. Instead, it feels like the pause before a whispered truth. A breath taken before a long-awaited answer. You close your eyes for a moment and simply listen. There is no wind here, no rustle of sand, no echo of distant city sounds. Yet the stillness is not void. It thrums with presence, a presence that feels ancient yet gentle, vast yet intimate. It calms you, yet at the same time awakens something in your spirit, as if inviting you to open yourself to a truth too deep for words. You imagine the countless seekers who have climbed this mountain before you, souls hungry for clarity, for purpose, for meaning that stretches beyond the horizon. You imagine long nights spent in contemplation, quiet prayers whispered into the stone, and moments when the heart trembles with questions too heavy to carry alone. The cave holds those memories. It breathes with them. Then, for the briefest moment, you feel something, an almost imperceptible shift in the air, like a feather brushing the edge of your awareness. It is not a sound, not a sight, more like a pulse, a ripple, a presence pressing gently but unmistakably into the world. Your breath catches, not from fear, but from awe. You do not witness anything extraordinary. There is no blinding light, no thunder, no voice breaking through the air. But the cave feels full, charged, timeless, as if the unseen has stepped closer, brushing against the realm of the living, as if something sacred has crossed a threshold, whispering into existence a message that will echo across continents and centuries. You sit in stillness, not daring to move. The air feels heavy with meaning, with a turning point you cannot yet understand. The mountain, the sky, the earth beneath you. Everything seems to hold its breath along with you. After some time, the moments impossible to measure, you slowly rise. The tranquility remains, wrapping itself around you like a mantle. You step toward the cave's entrance, pausing once more to take in the quiet. The world outside glows with the first warm light of dawn, painting the cliffs with gold and shading the valleys in soft violet. You begin your descent down the mountain path, your thoughts quieter than they've ever been. Each step feels lighter, though your heart is full, as if carrying an echo of something vast and luminous. The city comes into clearer view as the sun climbs, rooftops catching the light one by one like awakening embers. But even from this distance, you sense a shift. Voices carry differently. Movements ripple across the roads. A tension, subtle but unmistakable, stirs through Mecca like wind brushing across tall grass. People are gathering. Something has happened. Something is being spoken, repeated, questioned, whispered from home to home, street to street. The news spreads like a breath carried on morning air. The streets of Mecca seem smaller now, though the stone and sand remained unchanged. Whispers followed Muhammad wherever he went, murmurs that grew louder with each passing day. He walked among the bustling markets and narrow alleyways, a figure at once familiar and unfamiliar to those who knew him. Friends noticed a new gravity in his eyes, a quiet intensity that hadn't been there before. Conversations paused when he passed, not out of fear, but from an unspoken sense that something profound had occurred. The news spread unevenly. Some dismissed it as nothing more than fatigue from his long retreats in the mountains, while others, drawn by curiosity, speculated about visions, divine signs, or secret revelations. Merchants in the market muttered about the way he no longer engaged in idle chatter. Children stared as he walked by, sensing the calm energy that seemed to hum around him. Even the camels, patient witnesses to the endless comings and goings of the city, seemed to pause momentarily when he passed. Muhammad's own world felt different. The quiet of Hira lingered in his mind, as though the mountain had imprinted a subtle rhythm into his heartbeat. Each step through the city brought flashes of memory. The cave's cool shadows, the soft echo of wind through rock, the hush that preceded revelation. And with it came a growing weight, not of fear, but of responsibility. He felt a tug toward something immense, something that demanded action yet could not be hurried. Among those who noticed these changes most keenly was Khadijah, his wife. She saw not just the outward signs, the restless nights, the drawn lines of concentration, but the deeper shifts within him. She had known Muhammad for years, trusted his judgment, and admired his integrity. Yet now, she glimpsed a layer of his soul that seemed both radiant and fragile, a luminous clarity tempered by awe. Her intuition told her that this was more than a passing episode. It was the beginning of something that would ripple far beyond the confines of their home. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the desert walls gold, Muhammad arrived at their house, silent, but carrying the weight of what had transpired. Khadijah greeted him with the quiet warmth that had always been their sanctuary. She noted the tremor in his hands, the slight catch in his breath, and the unspoken words that hovered between them. Without hesitation, she took his hands in hers, steadying him, anchoring him in the tangible world outside the vastness of Hira. "I am with you," she said simply, her voice a steadying current in the swirling uncertainty. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." Muhammad's eyes met hers, gratitude and wonder mingling in the depths of his gaze. Words were not yet necessary. The understanding passed silently, a bond forged stronger by the extraordinary weight of what had begun to unfold. She had always been his confidant, and now, more than ever, she became his first witness to the extraordinary path ahead. Outside, the city continued its usual rhythm: market calls, the laughter of children, the clatter of hooves and feet. But within the walls of their home, a new urgency and purpose took root. This was the moment the first ripples began, subtle yet unstoppable. Muhammad's experience in the solitude of Hira had not remained confined to the mountain. It had descended with him, spreading quietly into the lives of those around him. Even as they spoke in whispers, Muhammad could sense the weight of the future pressing closer. The world outside was unchanged, yet everything had shifted. The ordinary would soon confront the extraordinary, and Khadija's unwavering support became the first pillar against the tide of uncertainty. The ripples had begun, delicate as the flutter of a bird's wing, but destined to grow into waves that would reshape hearts, minds, and the very fabric of Mecca itself. And as the night settled over the city, Muhammad and Khadija sat together, holding fast to one another, unaware of how vast those ripples would soon become. The first stirrings of revelation were no longer confined to a cave. They had begun to move outward, touching everything and everyone in their path. The house of Muhammad and Khadija was a sanctuary in the midst of Mecca's restless bustle. Within its walls, the world outside seemed to slow, the market calls fading into the distance, the footsteps of strangers softened to echoes. Khadija moved with a quiet confidence, her presence steady and luminous. Every gesture, every word carried reassurance, and for Muhammad, it was a balm to the intensity of the revelations he carried within him. She listened intently as he spoke, not just to his words, but to the silences in between, the pauses that carried the weight of awe, fear, and wonder. She never rushed him, never questioned his sincerity, and never dismissed the tremors of doubt that sometimes shook him. Her faith in him was unwavering, born not from blind trust, but from years of knowing his character, his honesty, and his unwavering commitment to truth. In her calm, Muhammad found a mirror for his own heart, a place where the extraordinary could settle without chaos, where fear could meet understanding. Visitors who came to the house quickly recognized this rare dynamic. Merchants, travelers, and even neighbors spoke of Khadija's generosity and insight, noting how she inspired confidence and drew others into the quiet gravity of her presence. She was a woman who saw beyond appearances, who understood the subtleties of character and intention. People marveled at the way she supported her husband, not by overshadowing him, nor by mere encouragement, but through an unshakable faith that grounded him, a trust that allowed him to explore the profound without hesitation. One evening, as the soft glow of oil lamps illuminated the room, Khadija and Muhammad sat together in contemplative silence. The night air drifted in through open windows, carrying the distant scent of spices and the low murmur of the city. It was in this serene pause that Khadija spoke, her voice gentle, but carrying a weight of purpose. "Muhammad," she said, "there is someone I want you to meet. My cousin, Waraka ibn Nawfal, is a learned man. He has studied the scriptures of old, the histories and teachings passed down through generations. He understands what few in Mecca can." Muhammad looked up, curiosity mingling with a hint of apprehension. The cave's revelations still pulsed within him, and the world outside often felt both familiar and alien. To speak with someone who could comprehend the gravity of what he had experienced was both a relief and a source of quiet tension. Khadijah continued, "He is wise and thoughtful. He has knowledge of the sacred texts of the past, of prophecies and signs. I believe he may understand, even if just in part, what you are beginning to grasp." Her eyes softened, and she placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Trust in him as you have trusted me." Muhammad nodded, the weight of her support settling deeper in his chest. It was not just her words, but the unwavering certainty behind them, the calm assurance that someone could stand beside him in the midst of uncertainty. In that moment, the household became more than a home. It was a place of guidance, of trust, of beginnings that could not yet be fully seen. As the days passed, Muhammad prepared to visit Waraka, carrying with him the intensity of Hira, the first words of revelation, and the quiet, grounding faith of Khadijah. He understood that knowledge alone could not anchor what he had seen and heard. It was the combination of insight, loyalty, and wisdom that would shape the next steps of his journey. Khadijah's words lingered as he walked through the city, a gentle reminder that the path he now trod was not solitary. The house of trust, as it had come to feel, was a sanctuary not only of love and support, but of the courage to face what others might neither understand nor accept. And as Muhammad approached the home of her cousin, he sensed that the guidance he sought was waiting, ready to meet him at the intersection of faith and understanding. The first steps toward a wider acknowledgement of his calling were being taken, and with Khadijah's unwavering presence, Muhammad moved forward into a world still shadowed by uncertainty, yet illuminated by trust. The home of Waraka ibn Nawfal stood quietly at the edge of the city, a modest dwelling filled with the scent of parchment and ink. Muhammad entered with a mixture of reverence and apprehension, accompanied by Khadijah, whose calm presence made the journey lighter. The scholar rose from his seat, a figure of gentle authority, his eyes alight with curiosity and deep understanding. Waraka gestured for them to sit, his voice warm but measured. "Tell me," he said, leaning forward slightly, "what has stirred your spirit so profoundly?" Muhammad recounted the experience in Hira, the solitude, the trembling, the overwhelming clarity of the first words revealed. He spoke with honesty, every hesitation and tremor in his voice mirrored by the scholar's attentive gaze. When the words had been shared, Waraka's expression shifted from listening to quiet contemplation. His hands folded over his chest, and his eyes seemed to scan distant memories. "This pattern," he began slowly, "is not new. Throughout history, there have been those chosen to receive messages from the divine, individuals whose lives mark the turning of eras. The world itself bends toward these moments, though few recognize them in their time." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I see in you the signs of prophethood," Waraka continued, his voice a careful balance of solemnity and wonder, the tremors of fear, the sudden clarity, the certainty tempered with humility. These are the hallmarks of one who is called. The messages you have received are not yours alone. They are meant to be carried to others, to guide, to awaken, to challenge the hearts of men. Muhammad listened, absorbing the confirmation with both relief and the dawning awareness of responsibility. The words of Waraka gave shape to what had seemed for so long an indescribable experience. He had wondered if the visions were his alone, if they were figments of the mind strained by solitude. Now, Waraka's recognition grounded him, bridging the gap between the extraordinary and the tangible world around him. The scholar leaned closer, his voice dropping into a grave, almost urgent tone. But know this: those who are chosen to convey such truths are often met with resistance. The path ahead is not without hardship. The city you know, the markets and families will not all welcome what you bring. Yet the signs are clear, and your role cannot be denied. Muhammad's gaze dropped to the floor, feeling both the weight of the calling and the quiet reassurance in Waraka's knowledge. The scholar's presence was like a mirror, reflecting the significance of what had been set in motion on the mountain, yet reminding him of the practical reality he would face among his people. Then, Waraka's eyes brightened with a mixture of awe and concern. "Remember this," he said, placing a hand on Muhammad's shoulder. "Mecca will not remain the same. What is beginning in you will ripple outward, changing hearts and traditions. Some will resist, others will embrace, but the city, your home, will bear witness to transformation, unlike any it has known before." Khadija's hand found Muhammad's, a quiet anchor amidst the gravity of Waraka's words. He felt the urgency in the scholar's tone, the sense that the present was merely the threshold of what was to come. The quiet certainty of Khadija and the measured insight of Waraka merged in his mind, preparing him for the trials and responsibilities that lay ahead. As they rose to leave, Waraka offered one final, solemn nod, a recognition both of what had already occurred and what was inevitable. Muhammad stepped back into the streets of Mecca with Khadija by his side, the weight of revelation balanced now with guidance, support, and an awareness of the profound changes about to sweep through the city. The first ripples of prophecy had expanded into currents that would reshape lives, traditions, and hearts. Muhammad walked home, not as the man who had climbed Hira in solitude, but as one recognized, prepared, and silently charged to carry forward the message that had found him. Mecca was about to awaken in ways it could not yet imagine. The streets round the Kaaba were alive with movement, yet beneath the usual rhythm of merchants, pilgrims, and travelers, a tension simmered, nearly invisible but palpable. Muhammad and Khadija moved carefully through the throng, aware of the whispers that had grown louder since his return from Hira and his meeting with Waraka. Some voices were curious, some admiring, but others carried sharp edges, slicing through the air with suspicion and fear. The leaders of Quraysh had begun to take notice. Their conversations, often conducted in private courtyards or behind the veils of busy stalls, were filled with concern. The authority that had long governed Mecca, its wealth, its sacred traditions, and its influence over pilgrims, suddenly seemed fragile. The news of Muhammad's revelations, though shared sparingly and often in hushed tones, had spread enough to disturb the comfortable order. Muhammad observed the scenes quietly, noting the way groups gathered, heads close together, voices rising in urgency. One elder, his face etched with both experience and suspicion, spoke sharply to his companions. "This man," he said, nodding toward Muhammad without naming him, "claims truths that unsettle our people, our customs. He questions what we have long held sacred. Can we allow this to continue unchecked?" A younger merchant, gesturing with his hands, argued vehemently, "We cannot ignore him. If his words take root, our control over trade, our influence over pilgrims, even the sanctity of our city, all of it will be at risk. We must act, or the balance of power will slip from our hands. The discussions grew heated, echoing against the walls of the nearby stalls. Muhammad remained calm, his attention steady, his mind recalling the mountainside silence and Waraka's measured counsel. He saw that fear, more than reason, drove the Quraysh leader's agitation. It was not mere hostility. It was the anxiety of those who had built their lives upon structures suddenly questioned by a force beyond their understanding. As they moved closer to the Kaaba, one merchant, older and respected among his peers, raised his hand toward the sacred sanctuary itself. His voice carried both authority and caution. "See here," he said, gesturing to the cube of stone revered by all of Mecca. "This is the heart of our city, the anchor of our people. Whoever seeks to challenge its centrality risks more than their own reputation. They threaten the faith, the traditions, and the very unity of Quraysh." Muhammad listened, absorbing the gravity of the words. The Kaaba was more than a structure of stone. It was a symbol, a gathering point, a focal heart of Mecca's social, spiritual, and economic life. Understanding this was essential, not only for those who opposed change, but for anyone who sought to guide hearts and minds toward a message that could unsettle entrenched systems. Khadija's presence beside him remained a steadying influence, a reminder that he was not alone in navigating the delicate balance between revelation and resistance. Her insight, honed by experience and grounded in faith, allowed him to see not just the tension in the city, but also the potential for dialogue, for patience, and for strategic understanding. Muhammad realized that the opposition he witnessed was only the beginning. Those whose power and wealth were intertwined with tradition would not easily accept a message that demanded conscience and truth over comfort and status. Yet even in their fear and agitation, the presence of the Kaaba reminded him of the enduring significance of guidance, patience, and reverence. As he watched the leaders argue, their voices rising near the sacred cube, he understood that his journey would not only be spiritual, but deeply entwined with the social currents of Mecca. Change, he sensed, would ripple outward slowly, met with resistance and scrutiny, but inevitable in its force. The merchant's gesture toward the Kaaba lingered in his mind. The sanctuary's centrality, both literal and symbolic, would become a point of reflection, a lesson in understanding how hearts and societies are intertwined with what they hold sacred. The ripples of revelation were meeting the currents of tradition. In the city's heart, the Kaaba stood at the center of the unfolding challenge. The Kaaba rose before Muhammad like a silent sentinel, its weathered stones steeped in centuries of devotion and ritual. Even amid the clamor of the city, its presence commanded a weighty calm. Pilgrims moved around it in measured steps, their chants and prayers forming a rhythm that echoed through the alleys and open squares. Yet, alongside this sacred heartbeat, countless idols of polished stone and carved wood crowded the corners of the sanctuary, each representing the gods of various tribes, each demanding attention, fear, and reverence. Muhammad paused at the edge of the courtyard, feeling the strange mixture of history, devotion, and expectation pressing down upon him. He sensed the weight of generations, the countless prayers whispered and vows made beneath the same sun that now illuminated the Kaaba's walls. The air seemed to hum with unseen presence, as if centuries themselves were observing the unfolding moment. Time felt fluid here, stretching backward and forward simultaneously, each moment carrying echoes of worship, of power, of human longing. The idols, though lifeless, seemed to radiate a quiet insistence. Tribes from across Arabia had come to honor them, offering sacrifices, pouring gold and incense, repeating rituals passed down for generations. Their devotion was both tangible and formidable. Muhammad understood that this was not mere superstition, but a deeply rooted way of life, a framework that gave people identity, purpose, cohesion. Any message that challenged this order would not only question beliefs, it would challenge social structures, alliances, and long-held authority. Khadijah, walking quietly beside him, placed a hand on his arm. Her calm presence grounded him, reminding him that even in the shadow of immense history and weighty tradition, he was not alone. Together, they observed the scene. Merchants haggling near the sacred stone, children darting among pilgrims, elders gesturing in prayer, their eyes cast upward in hope and fear alike. The Kaaba's gravity seemed to magnify every intention, every fear, every devotion in its orbit. As they lingered, Muhammad overheard murmured conversations among the Quraysh leaders clustered near the corners of the courtyard. Their voices were low but sharp, carrying the unmistakable edge of concern and calculation. "We cannot allow this to spread unchecked," one said, glancing around as if even the stones might be listening. "If his followers grow bold, the structure of our city, our authority, even the allegiance of the tribes will be at risk." Another nodded, eyes darting toward the pilgrims circling the Kaaba. "We must pressure them, persuade them to abandon this influence. If they persist, we may need harsher measures. The balance of wealth, power, and tradition cannot bend for one man's vision." Muhammad felt the words like a ripple through the air, a warning of the challenges ahead. The Kaaba's serene presence seemed to contrast sharply with the brewing tension around it, as if the stones themselves bore witness to the cycles of devotion, authority, and dissent that had defined generations. Every whisper of plotting, every calculation to enforce compliance, seemed momentarily muted by the weight of history embedded in the sanctuary. Khadijah's hand tightened on his arm, and he felt the quiet truth of her steadfastness. The path of revelation would not be free of confrontation. The Kaaba, eternal and unyielding, would serve as both witness and battleground, a reminder of how deeply belief, tradition, and human ambition were intertwined. Muhammad understood then that the calm of the Kaaba did not mean safety or neutrality. Its gravity amplified every intention and every act, both worshipful and self-serving. As he turned to leave, the outlines of the idols seemed to flicker in the waning light, and he realized that change would not come quietly. The shadow of the Kaaba stretched over the city, over its people, over the lives of those who would embrace or resist the message he carried. The murmurs of the Quraysh lingered as they departed, a prelude to the trials to come. Pressure would be applied, followers tested, loyalties challenged. The Kaaba's eternal shadow had not only witnessed the past, it now cast its weight over the unfolding struggle that would define the future. Away from the bustling streets of Mecca and the looming presence of the Kaaba, Muhammad walked through narrow alleys toward a humble gathering place where soft murmurs and quiet movements marked a different kind of devotion. Here, among a small circle of early followers, the atmosphere was subdued but alive with intent. Candles flickered against stone walls, casting shadows that danced like living lessons on patience and understanding. The group had formed slowly, cautiously. Word of Muhammad's message had spread beyond the marketplaces and courtyards, reaching those whose hearts were open to truth, but wary of public attention. In this quiet space, they learned not only the words of revelation, but the practices that accompanied them. Acts of compassion, patience with the ignorant and the hostile, devotion in silence, and the quiet courage that faith demands. Muhammad observed them as they shared stories of their own struggles, how they had resisted mocking neighbors, how they had chosen kindness when insult was easier, how they had embraced charity despite scarcity. Each story, each example, was a brick in the foundation of a community that was forming without grandeur, without spectacle, but with a strength that emanated from sincerity and commitment. Among them were men and women, young and old, some well known in the markets, others quiet and reserved in their daily lives. Their courage was understated, yet unmistakable. A young man, barely more than a boy, spoke of how he had defended the weak despite ridicule from peers. An elder woman shared how she had offered refuge to a neighbor in need, even when others had turned away. Every action, small in the eyes of the city, carried a resonance of quiet rebellion. A rebellion not of violence, but of truth, integrity, and faith. Muhammad's presence, though commanding in the wider world, blended into the circle here. He taught with humility, listening as much as speaking, guiding without overpowering. The lessons were not simply about worship or ritual. They were about the essence of living with awareness, compassion, and courage in a world that resisted change. In their faces, he saw reflection and understanding, and a sense of possibility that gave shape to the ripples begun in Hira, nurtured in Khadijah's home, and affirmed by Waraka's counsel. As night approached, the circle grew quieter, a shared understanding settling over them. Their devotion was private, shielded from the scrutiny and hostility that had begun to stir among the Quraysh. Yet despite the smallness of their numbers and the fragility of their safety, the air was charged with resolve. They knew the cost of faith could be high, but they also recognized that courage in the quiet moments mattered as much as bravery in the streets. Finally, one of the group, a woman whose eyes shone with determination, approached Muhammad. "There are those who would harm us if they knew we gathered here," she said gently. "We have learned, but the city is not yet ready for our strength. We move carefully for our protection and the protection of those who wish to follow." She paused, then offered a hand of invitation. "Tonight, we go to the outskirts. There, we can pray, learn, and prepare in safety. Will you join us?" Muhammad felt the weight of her words, the delicate balance between vigilance and courage. The circle's quiet strength had already begun to ripple outward, but tonight would require movement, foresight, and trust. It was a step beyond learning in silence, a step into action, guided by faith and grounded in care for the community. Khadija, standing nearby, gave him a knowing glance, her calm affirmation a steady current beneath the uncertainty. Muhammad nodded. Together, they would walk the path with those who had already embraced belief, extending the circle while preserving its safety. As night deepened over Mecca, the small group prepared to move. Each heart carried both fear and hope, but also the undeniable courage of those who had discovered that even in quiet gatherings, faith could take root, grow, and illuminate the path forward. The journey to the outskirts awaited, where devotion and discretion would converge, and where the earliest believers would begin to strengthen one another against the shadows that stirred in the city. The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of sand illuminated by the soft glow of countless stars. The small group of early believers gathered quietly in a secluded hollow, away from the city's restless eyes. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of desert flora and the distant murmur of sleeping animals. In this vast open space, their prayers took on a new depth, each movement and word resonating against the stillness, mingling with the rhythm of the universe itself. Muhammad knelt among them, his gaze lifted toward the heavens. The stars seemed unusually bright tonight, glittering with a clarity that felt almost purposeful, as if the cosmos itself were leaning in to witness the devotion below. Each believer, kneeling or bowing in silent focus, radiated a quiet strength, their faith intertwining with the night in a harmony that felt both fragile and eternal. The prayers were simple, yet profound, grounded in gratitude, humility, and the recognition of forces greater than themselves. Every whisper of supplication, every pause, every bowed head seemed to ripple outward, touching the desert sands and reaching toward the endless sky. In their concentration, the group discovered a serenity unlike anything found within the crowded, noisy streets of Mecca, a calm that spoke not only to faith, but to courage, resilience, and unity. Khadija sat nearby, observing with quiet pride. Her presence, steady and reassuring, provided a grounding force for Muhammad and for the others. In the rhythm of their devotion, she saw the first sparks of community taking root, the beginning of a fellowship that would be tested, refined, and strengthened in the days to come. The young men and women whispered lessons to one another, gentle reminders of patience, compassion, and humility. They spoke of the courage it took to stand for truth in the face of skepticism and scorn. Each story, each word, carried an unspoken promise that the hardships of the day could be met with the strength of faith, that fear could coexist with hope, and that even a small circle of believers could illuminate darkness. As the night deepened, Muhammad's eyes lingered on the constellations, finding a quiet parallel between the heavens and the growing community below. The vastness above mirrored the immensity of their task, while the twinkling lights reminded him that even small points of guidance could shine across the darkness. In this moment, he felt both the weight of responsibility and the subtle reassurance that he was not alone. The universe itself seemed to acknowledge the sincerity of their prayers. Yet serenity, as often happens, carried a fragile edge. A distant shout cut through the gentle rustle of the desert wind, abrupt and urgent. The believers froze, their eyes scanning the horizon. From the direction of Mecca came the unmistakable sound of raised voices. Patrols searching for signs of those who had left the city under cover of night. A hush fell over the group, tension coiling beneath the calm exterior. Muhammad rose slowly, his gaze steady, noting the startled glances exchanged among the believers. Each heart beat faster, yet the lesson of patience and awareness remained. The night's prayers had not disappeared. They were a reservoir of calm and courage, a reminder that even in danger, clarity and unity could guide action. Khadija whispered to him, her tone measured but urgent. "We must remain vigilant. Lead them wisely. Every step counts." Muhammad nodded, feeling the weight of leadership settle upon him. The stars above, so constant and clear, seemed to offer quiet counsel, as if to remind him that even in the shadow of pursuit, the path of faith and devotion continued to stretch forward, luminous and steadfast. The desert night, which had begun with serene devotion, now held both protection and peril, its vastness sheltering yet exposing, its stillness masking the approaching threat. The believers gathered themselves, prepared to move, to respond, and to trust the guidance that had brought them together beneath the listening stars. The first light of dawn had yet to touch the desert, leaving the rocky valley shrouded in shadow. Muhammad and his small circle moved swiftly but cautiously, their footsteps muffled against the uneven ground. The stars had faded, but their vigilance remained sharp, every sense attuned to the distant shouts and hurried movements of the Quraysh patrols combing the hills. The air itself seemed charged, tremors of tension vibrating through the sands and stones. The wadi stretched before them, a maze of jagged cliffs, narrow passes, and scattered boulders. It offered both refuge and peril. Misstep could leave one injured or exposed, yet its winding paths provided cover from the eyes of pursuers. The group pressed on silently, led by a young man whose familiarity with the terrain gave him a quiet authority. His movements were swift, almost instinctual, and his eyes constantly scanned the surrounding hills, alert for any sign of the trackers. Every so often, a distant voice or the clatter of hooves reminded them of the danger pressing close. Muhammad felt the tension in each heart around him, the mix of fear and determination, adrenaline and faith. Yet, despite the anxiety, there was also a rhythm to their flight, a shared understanding that each step, each careful maneuver, was an act of preservation and trust. The desert demanded both courage and patience, and the small group responded with a discipline born of necessity. Khadija's presence, though quiet, was a steadying force. She whispered encouragement to those faltering, her calm certainty a shield against the rising panic. Muhammad himself moved with measured purpose, aware that their survival depended not only on speed, but on vigilance, clarity, and the cohesion of the group. He recalled Waraka's words about the trials ahead, the resistance of tradition, the hostility of those threatened by change, and realized that this flight was the first tangible test of courage for his followers. The terrain grew more treacherous as the wadi narrowed, cliffs rising sharply on either side. Loose stones skittered underfoot, threatening to betray their passage. Yet the young guide pressed on, leading them through hidden paths, small crevices, and low overhangs that masked their movements. Every turn and bend in the valley seemed to stretch time, the tension thick enough to taste. But with every careful step, the group drew closer to the safety promised at the journey's end. Finally, the guide slowed, signaling a brief pause. They crouched behind a large rock, listening. In the distance, the echoes of Quraysh searching parties had begun to fade, the shouts carried away by the desert wind. Relief was subtle, but palpable. A collective exhale shared quietly among them. Muhammad took the moment to scan the horizon, noting the faint outlines of a settlement where the guide's familiarity promised sanctuary. "This way," the young man whispered, beckoning them forward. His tone carried both assurance and urgency. "Abu Bakr awaits. His home is prepared for you. From there, you will be safe for the day, and the city's reach will be kept at bay." Muhammad's heart lifted slightly at the name. Abu Bakr, a trusted companion and steadfast supporter, had prepared a refuge, a place where the fledgling community could rest, recover, and plan the next steps. The promise of safety brought a renewed steadiness to their movements, a momentary reprieve from the tension that had gripped every nerve. With cautious optimism, the group followed the guide through the final twists of the wadi. Each shadowed curve and rocky ledge now carried a sense of hope, mingled with the lingering awareness that danger was never far. The sun, still low on the horizon, cast long golden slants across the rocks, illuminating the path just enough to hint at the shelter ahead. As they approached Abu Bakr's safe house, the rocky walls of the wadi seemed to relax around them, the threat of pursuit momentarily held at bay. The group's steps slowed, their breathing deepened, and a quiet gratitude settled among them. Here, beneath the sheltering cliffs, and within the trust of a loyal companion, they would find the strength to continue, a small oasis of safety amid the uncertainty that stretched across the desert and the city alike. The journey through the wadi had tested their courage, their patience, and their unity, and now, at last, they reached a place where faith, friendship, and careful planning could converge into the next chapter of their journey. The small home of Abu Bakr offered a warm contrast to the harsh open expanses of the wadi. Its walls, modest but sturdy, enclosed a space that smelled faintly of herbs and oil lamps. Muhammad and the group entered cautiously, but the tension of their flight eased almost immediately under the calm, steady presence of Abu Bakr himself. He rose to greet them, his voice gentle yet assured, every gesture radiating trust and solidarity. "Welcome," he said simply, bowing slightly in respect. His eyes met each member of the group, conveying recognition of their courage and the trials they had endured. "Here, you will find safety and calm. Rest and regain your strength." The believers exhaled quietly, their bodies easing into the security of the space. Some sank onto the floor, others leaned against walls, but all carried the unspoken acknowledgement that Abu Bakr's home was more than shelter. It was a refuge of care, patience, and guidance. Muhammad observed the humility in Abu Bakr's movements, the absence of pride or pretense. Even in the presence of one called to convey divine truth, Abu Bakr remained grounded, his leadership expressed through service and quiet confidence. Once the initial relief had settled, the room became a place of planning. Small maps and notes were laid out on the low table, detailing routes, hiding places, and safe houses for families now facing persecution in Mecca. Abu Bakr spoke calmly but firmly, balancing practical advice with encouragement. "We must protect those who cannot yet move freely," he said. "Those whose homes and families are threatened need guidance, care, and a place to breathe safely. Every step we take should be measured, every action intentional." Muhammad nodded, absorbing both the gravity of the work and the quiet courage emanating from Abu Bakr. Even amid fear, Abu Bakr's humility provided steadiness. The believers, many still shaken from the night's flight through the wadi, found their own courage renewed simply by witnessing his composure. Plans unfolded slowly, with questions asked and answered, care taken to ensure that safety was prioritized alongside the growing sense of mission. Abu Bakr's eyes then softened as he shifted the conversation. "There is one among us whose trial weighs heavily on my heart," he said. "Bilal. He is a slave of the Quraysh, punished for believing. His steadfastness, his refusal to abandon faith despite the suffering inflicted upon him, has become an inspiration to many. Yet his life is in danger, and we must act carefully to protect him." A hush fell over the room as the gravity of Bilal's situation sank in. Even among this small circle of believers, the stories of persecution were a reminder that faith carried real cost. Abu Bakr's words were neither dramatic nor exaggerated. They were a sober acknowledgement of the challenges ahead, of the moral and practical responsibilities of those committed to guiding and protecting others. Muhammad's gaze softened, both in empathy and resolve. He had seen the courage of the early followers, the quiet heroism of those who chose patience, devotion, and integrity over comfort or safety. Bilal's ordeal now stood as a concrete symbol of the trials faced by those who dared to follow a path not yet accepted by the wider community. Abu Bakr continued, outlining discrete measures to safeguard Bilal and others, detailing routes, allies, and contingencies. Each plan was pragmatic, rooted in the reality of Mecca's watchful eyes, yet guided by compassion and the knowledge that faith demanded both courage and care. Every believer in the room felt the tension of necessity, tempered by the reassurance of leadership, grounded in humility. As the evening deepened, the room became quiet again, but the sense of purpose remained. Abu Bakr's home was not simply a place of refuge. It was a sanctuary of courage, strategy, and moral clarity. Here, even in the shadow of persecution, hope and determination found their roots, ready to carry the fledgling community forward. Muhammad reflected on the strength of those around him, the quiet bravery of early believers, Khadija's steadfast support, and Abu Bakr's unassuming leadership. Together, they faced the growing challenges, ready to protect the vulnerable and extend the circle of faith, one careful step at a time. The story of Bilal, waiting beyond the city walls, would soon become a test not only of loyalty, but of the enduring power of compassion and courage. The morning sun beat down Rishira relentlessly on the open square of Mecca, casting harsh light across the cobbled streets and the stone walls of the marketplace. There, in the center, stood Bilal, his posture upright, his eyes steady, his chest rising and falling with measured breaths. Around him, the agents of the Quraysh moved with grim efficiency, each strike intended to break him, to force submission. But Bilal did not falter. Muhammad observed from a careful distance the weight of the moment pressing upon him. The punishments were brutal, physical, and public, intended not only to torment Bilal, but to send a warning to anyone who dared embrace the new message. Yet in every blow, every insult, Bilal's spirit remained unshaken. He endured the suffering with a calm dignity that seemed almost otherworldly, his faith radiating outward like a light that could not be dimmed. The crowd surrounding him shifted uneasily. Some watched in horror, their faces pale, mouths opening as if to speak but finding no words. Others, loyal to tradition and authority, cheered quietly, urging the enforcers onward. And yet, despite the mix of fear and malice, Bilal's resolve carved a path through the tension. His eyes were fixed upward, his lips whispering prayers that carried across the square in faint, unbroken cadence. Muhammad felt a swell of both sorrow and inspiration. Bilal's courage was not loud or dramatic. It was steady, unwavering, and profoundly humbling. Even those who had fled the city in fear, who had watched from the safety of hidden alleys or distant rooftops, found themselves renewed by the slave's example. Strength, Muhammad realized, was not only in action or strategy, it was in the steadfastness of the heart, in the refusal to bow to cruelty when the truth demanded endurance. Khadijah stood beside him, silent but present. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, a grounding force as the scene unfolded. She had known the cost of belief, the delicate balance between courage and preservation, and yet even she could not help but be moved by Bilal's unyielding faith. His spirit carries more weight than the strongest chains, she whispered. The enforcers pressed on, but every strike, every attempt to humiliate, only highlighted Bilal's strength. The eyes of the city, briefly riveted on him, began to shift. Some murmured admiration, others exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the beginnings of a power that could not be suppressed by force alone. Even in his suffering, Bilal became a symbol, not just of faith, but of the quiet, unbreakable courage that could ignite hearts in ways no army or decree ever could. Muhammad stepped back, allowing the moment to settle in the minds of the witnesses, including those who had fled from Mecca's streets to follow quietly. He understood the subtle lessons at play: patience under trial, integrity under pressure, and the magnetic force of conviction that drew attention, even without proclamation or command. And yet, even as inspiration spread, news carried by whispers and hurried footsteps began to ripple through the city. The name of Umar ibn al-Khattab arose, spoken with both fear and certainty. He was a figure known for his fierce temper and uncompromising stance. Rumors suggested he had heard of the growing movement, the early gatherings, and now, like the beating sun itself, his anger was said to illuminate the city. Muhammad sensed the shift before he heard the full reports. The same forces that had punished Bilal would soon mobilize with even greater urgency. Opposition was no longer limited to hushed threats and private punishments. It was moving toward open confrontation. The lessons of courage, patience, and strategy would soon be tested on a larger, more volatile scale. Yet, as he looked again at Bilal, standing resilient beneath the harsh sunlight, Muhammad recognized a truth that would carry forward. No force, no fury, no threat could extinguish the strength born of unwavering faith. And though Umar's name now hovered on the horizon, dark with tension, the seeds of conviction and courage had already been sown, ready to grow in the hearts of those who witnessed and followed. The city's heat bore down, but Bilal's resolve shone brighter, a quiet flame that would illuminate the trials to come. The streets of Mecca were unusually tense that afternoon, the sun harsh and unforgiving, yet another force pressing upon the city's restless inhabitants. News of Bilal's steadfastness had spread quietly, carried in whispers through market stalls, alleys, and caravan routes. Among those who heard, one name stirred a particular mix of fear and anticipation: Umar ibn al-Khattab. Known for his fiery temper and uncompromising nature, he had long been a formidable figure in Mecca, respected, feared, and unyielding in his defense of tradition. Muhammad watched from a distance as Umar stormed through the city, his steps heavy, each movement radiating tension and anger. The young man's face was set like flint, his eyes narrowing at the murmurs of followers gathered quietly in the streets. For weeks, he had heard reports of secret gatherings, of people quietly learning compassion and patience, of the unbroken spirit of Bilal under the sun's harsh gaze. Each account ignited his fury, yet beneath the anger, a subtle disquiet began to stir, a sense that these stories carried more than mere rebellion. They carried truth. Umar's path eventually brought him face to face with one of Muhammad's small circle, a young believer who dared to speak with calm courage. "You cannot deny what you see," the follower said softly, meeting Umar's glare without flinching. "It is not rebellion, nor insolence, but faith. The truth lives in hearts that seek guidance." The words struck deeper than Umar anticipated. His mind raced, torn between the impulse to enforce authority and the quiet stirrings of recognition. He recalled the tales of Bilal, unbroken under punishment, and of the other early believers whose courage, patience, and devotion shone through. Danger. He remembered the words whispered to him by friends who had observed without bias. That conviction and integrity could not be silenced by threats alone. For the first time, Umar confronted the possibility that the movement he had sought to suppress might carry a wisdom beyond his initial understanding. He felt his anger collide with reason, pride clashing with humility. Each account he heard, the whispered gatherings, the steadfast prayers beneath the stars, the quiet teachings of Muhammad, forced him to reckon with a reality he could not dismiss. The turning point came not with a dramatic confrontation, but in a moment of profound reflection. Alone, in the heat of the afternoon, Umar's gaze fell upon a small group of followers practicing their prayers, their devotion untouched by fear or scorn. Their calm, deliberate movements, their unspoken courage, pierced the armor of his anger. The clarity he had resisted now presented itself starkly. There was truth here, a calling beyond tradition, a purpose that transcended authority and fear. Muhammad observed the shift subtly, noting Umar's hesitation and the flicker of contemplation in his eyes. He did not press, did not speak. The transformation was internal, a quiet surrender of ego to understanding. When Umar finally approached, his steps were measured, his expression no longer dominated by fury, but tempered by humility and curiosity. "I have heard," Umar said, his voice steady but careful, "of what I once sought to destroy. I see now that I judged too quickly, that anger blinded me to the truth." His eyes met Muhammad's, and in that instant, a bridge formed, a connection rooted not in fear or obligation, but in recognition of sincerity and faith. The community, sensing the change, felt a ripple of cautious hope. Umar's acceptance, unexpected yet genuine, carried weight. Where his presence once inspired fear, it now lent protection, authority aligned with integrity. The early believers, who had moved quietly for weeks under shadowed vigilance, began to feel emboldened. Their gatherings grew steadier, their voices less whispered, their courage more overt. Muhammad understood that this moment marked a turning point, not merely in the heart of one man, but in the momentum of a community finding its strength. With Umar's recognition, the movement gained not only numbers, but confidence, a reassurance that faith and conviction could stand against opposition without yielding to it. The streets of Mecca, once tense with suspicion and quiet threat, now carried a subtle change in rhythm. Whispers of hope mingled with awe, and the early believers, steady, courageous, and increasingly bold, continued their journey toward spreading the message that had begun in the mountains and found its foothold in hearts willing to receive it. Nestled in a quiet corner of Mecca, away from the bustling marketplaces and watchful eyes of the Quraysh, the house of Al-Arqam awaited like a hidden heartbeat within the city. Its walls were modest, its entrances unassuming. Yet inside, the space throbbed with life, devotion, and the quiet determination of those who had chosen faith over fear. Muhammad entered alongside his followers, feeling the familiar mixture of reverence and purpose that always accompanied these gatherings. The room was small but orderly, its simplicity reflecting the humility of its inhabitants. Faint scents of oil and herbs lingered in the air, mingling with the soft rustle of pages and the low murmur of prayer. Candles flickered against the walls, illuminating faces intent on learning, memorizing, and absorbing every teaching. Here, in this sanctuary, revelation was not merely recited, it was understood, discussed, and woven into the daily lives of those who had committed themselves to the path. Muhammad moved among them, observing as the new believers recited passages with care, corrected one another gently, and encouraged even the shyest voices to speak aloud. Each lesson carried more than knowledge. It carried courage, patience, and a sense of unity. In these walls, fear found no purchase. The oppressive gaze of Mecca could not penetrate the quiet strength that had taken root here. The group gathered in small circles, sharing experiences, fears, and reflections. A young woman spoke softly of her family's scorn, describing the challenges of maintaining faith in secrecy. A man, older and weathered by years of Mecca's scrutiny, shared how he had resisted ridicule with patience and prayer. Each story, each whisper, reinforced the bonds among them, reminding all present that devotion was a shared burden and a shared gift. Khadijah and Abu Bakr were present, offering guidance and reassurance. their calm authority reinforcing the quiet order of the room. They reminded the believers that strength was not measured by outward displays, but by consistency, understanding, and perseverance. Muhammad's own presence added a grounding clarity, his voice steady as he taught, questioned, and listened in equal measure. The House of Al-Arqam had become more than a school or a meeting place. It was a refuge, a forge in which courage, conviction, and knowledge were tempered. Here, the fledgling community could grow in confidence, learning not only the words of revelation, but the ways in which they could live them, defend them, and inspire others. Every whispered prayer, every gentle correction, and every shared reflection wove the group closer together, strengthening the foundation of a movement still vulnerable to the eyes of those outside. Yet even within these safe walls, the reality of Mecca's scrutiny was never far away. As the evening deepened, a messenger arrived, slipping through the door with urgency in his step. He brought news of the growing pressure from Quraysh, of the watchfulness that had intensified in recent days, and of plans to uncover and suppress gatherings like this one. The room fell into a hush as the words sank in. The believers exchanged glances, the flickering candlelight reflecting concern, resolve, and determination. Muhammad listened carefully, weighing the danger against the need to sustain the community, protect the followers, and continue the quiet expansion of knowledge and faith. Abu Bakr spoke gently, reassuring the group, "We will remain cautious. We will continue our teachings, our prayers, and our gatherings, but always with care. Fear cannot drive us into hiding forever, yet wisdom must guide our steps." Khadija nodded, her eyes conveying calm determination, a reminder that the strength of the house lay not only in secrecy, but in trust, in planning, and in steadfast hearts. Muhammad addressed the believers, his voice steady and resonant. "The pressure from outside is real, but it does not define us. Here, we learn, we grow, and we prepare. Each act of devotion, each lesson learned, fortifies us for what lies ahead. We are bound by faith, and that cannot be taken away." As the evening deepened into night, the House of Al-Arqam remained a sanctuary of resilience and guidance. Its walls sheltered not only the physical bodies of the believers, but the growing strength of a community committed to truth, patience, and unwavering courage. The next challenge, looming just beyond the door, would test them further. But inside these walls, they were fortified, ready to face the storms to get through them. The streets that of Mecca, once alive with the rhythm of trade and conversation, fell into an uneasy silence. Markets that had hummed with activity now remained shuttered. Caravans delayed or diverted, even familiar faces avoided one another, exchanging cautious glances but no words. Muhammad's clan, Banu Hashim, found themselves increasingly isolated. The weight of a collective decision made by Quraysh leaders pressing down like the midday sun. A harsh social and economic boycott had begun, and its impact was immediate, tangible, and suffocating. Muhammad observed the valley where his family lived, noting the empty stalls, the deserted roads, and the whispered conversations that skirted their homes. The boycott was not only a physical deprivation, it was a psychological assault. designed to fracture community bonds, to breed fear, and to make even the strongest hearts question their choices. The clan faced hunger, scarcity, and the quiet despair that accompanies long-term deprivation. Children cried softly at night, their small voices echoing the worries of their parents. Elderly relatives whispered prayers for relief, their hands pressed to their chests, eyes lifted toward a sky that offered no immediate comfort. Khadijah moved among the family, her presence a source of quiet reassurance. She distributed what little food remained, offered words of encouragement, and reminded them that resilience lay not only in survival, but in steadfastness. Her calm confidence, even in the face of grinding hunger, gave the clan a sense of stability. Muhammad, witnessing her tireless care, felt both sorrow and resolve. The boycott was intended to break their spirits, yet here, in these acts of devotion and service, he saw courage resisting oppression. The community outside the valley mirrored the isolation of Banu Hashim. Allies and distant relatives whispered of the boycott's cruelty, yet most were too frightened to act. The Quraysh enforced the blockade not only through explicit rules, but through subtle intimidation, making it clear that aid could invite suspicion or retaliation. Hunger spread, sickness crept quietly through households, and yet the clan's faith remained, fragile but unbroken. Muhammad's thoughts often drifted to the early followers, the small gatherings at the house of Al-Arqam, the quiet lessons in prayer and devotion, the bravery of Bilal under the sun. Their courage became a mirror, reflecting the endurance required now at home. Even as the boycott tightened, the principles of compassion, patience, and faith became lifelines, reminding the clan that the trials were not punishment, but tests of resilience. Months passed, and the valley's suffering intensified. Yet the Quraysh's plan, while brutal, was not infallible. Slowly, cracks appeared in the unity of those enforcing the boycott. Some merchants, unable to bear the ethical weight of denying aid to the starving, began to leave small provisions at the edges of the valley. Others questioned whether social isolation could truly bend the will of a family committed to justice and faith. Eventually, the boycott collapsed, not with a fanfare, but quietly, as the economic and social pressures proved unsustainable. Relief came swiftly, and with it, a wave of grief. The suffering that had been endured, the months of hunger and fear, the lives touched by hardship, left lingering marks on the hearts of those who had survived. Families wept, some quietly, others openly, mourning both the deprivation and the memories of what had been lost. Muhammad and Khadijah moved among them, offering consolation, prayers, and the quiet reassurance that the endurance of faith had preserved more than life itself. It had preserved integrity, community, and hope. The valley, scarred yet resilient, became a testament to survival under cruelty and the strength of conviction. The boycott, intended as a weapon of suppression, had failed to break the spirit of the believers. Grief followed swiftly, but so too did reflection, gratitude, and renewed determination. In the hearts of Banu Hashim, the seeds of resilience had taken root, preparing them for the challenges and victories still to come. The year dawned with a weight that pressed upon Muhammad's heart like an unrelenting storm. The losses were personal, deep, and unyielding. Khadijah, his steadfast companion and source of unwavering support, had passed, leaving a silence in the home that no words could fill. Abu Talib, the protector of his family and the clan, whose presence had shielded him from the fiercest attacks of the Quraysh, followed not long after, leaving a void in leadership and love. The city of Mecca, which had already been tense and divided, seemed heavier, as though the grief of one man had seeped into the streets, the markets, and even the air itself. Muhammad walked through familiar alleys, yet they felt unfamiliar now, laden with absence. Every corner of the city seemed to echo with memory, the laughter and counsel of Khadijah, the firm guidance and quiet protection of Abu Talib. The bustle of commerce and trade, which once provided rhythm and comfort, now felt hollow, carrying whispers of fear and uncertainty rather than vitality. Even the Kaaba, timeless and steadfast, seemed to cast a shadow that pressed heavier upon the city, a mirror of the sorrow within his own heart. In the quiet of his home, Muhammad reflected on the profound impact of these losses. Khadijah's faith had never wavered. She had believed in him when few dared, offering both counsel and protection. Her generosity, patience, and understanding had not only sustained him, but strengthened the fledgling community of believers. Abu Talib's loyalty had been a shield, allowing the message to take root despite the pressures of powerful opposition. Without them, the path ahead felt more perilous, the city more hostile, the responsibility more intense. Yet grief, though heavy, did not extinguish resolve. Muhammad understood that his mission remained, even as personal sorrow threatened to overwhelm him. The early believers continued to gather quietly in the shadows of Mecca, their faith steady, their courage palpable. He drew strength from their devotion, reminded that even in darkness, small lights could illuminate the way. The community, though shaken, remained a living testament to resilience, a reminder that the work begun in the mountains and reinforced in Khadijah's home was not yet finished. Still, the need for allies and understanding weighed upon him. The city, fraught with scrutiny and opposition, offered few avenues for support. Muhammad realized that survival and the growth of the message required courage not only at home, but beyond the familiar streets of Mecca. The weight of loss had not diminished the urgency of the mission. Rather, it had clarified the necessity of seeking new opportunities, new hearts willing to listen, and new communities ready to extend compassion and support. With this resolve, he turned his gaze beyond the city walls. Taif, a city known for its fertile valleys, supportive communities, and relative distance from the immediate pressures of the Quraysh, became the focus of his journey. The hope was not only to find support, but to foster alliances, understanding, and protection that could reinforce the struggling believers at home. Khadijah and Abu Talib had shaped the path that Muhammad walked. Their guidance, protection, and encouragement had been the foundation upon which he had relied. Though absent in body, their influence lingered, fortifying his determination, shaping his courage, and inspiring his steps forward. As he prepared to leave Mecca, the city behind him carried both sorrow and memory, a reminder of love lost and of the responsibilities that remained. Each step toward Taif was heavy with grief, yet buoyed by purpose. Muhammad understood that the trials of this year, marked by profound personal loss, would test him as never before. but they would also shape him, strengthen his resolve, and illuminate the resilience required to carry forward a message destined to endure. The streets of Mecca receded, but the memories and lessons of those lost companions remained vivid, guiding him toward a journey of hope, perseverance, and the search for allies beyond the familiar confines of his city. The road to Taif stretched ahead like a ribbon of uncertainty, winding through valleys and hills under the blazing sun. Muhammad traveled with measured steps, the weight of recent losses pressing heavily on his heart. Each mile carried memories of Khadijah's warmth, Abu Talib's protection, and the quiet strength of the believers left behind in Mecca. Yet he walked with resolve, knowing that the journey was necessary, not for himself alone, but for the fledgling community whose survival and growth depended on allies beyond the city walls. Arriving in Taif, the initial reception was lukewarm at best. Merchants and town leaders, wary of conflict with the powerful Quraysh, regarded Muhammad with suspicion. His message, simple yet profound, stirred curiosity in some hearts, but the prevailing caution of the city's inhabitants created a barrier that was difficult to overcome. As he sought to speak, to explain the principles of mercy, compassion, and justice, he encountered resistance not born of malice alone, but of fear and adherence to tradition. The rejection escalated into cruelty. A crowd gathered, faces twisted in anger and derision, some spurred on by leaders fearful of change. Stones were hurled, laughter mixed with shouts of insult, and Muhammad was forced to shield himself as the initial attempts at dialogue crumbled under hostility. Each rock, each cruel word left marks not only on his body, but on the hope he had carried for understanding in this distant city. The pain was sharp, immediate, and public, a test of endurance and faith. Yet even in the midst of physical and emotional assault, Muhammad's composure remained intact. He did not curse, did not retaliate. His movements were measured, his words steady. Those who witnessed the event, even from the edges of the crowd, felt the dissonance of violence against such calm. The principles he preached, compassion, forgiveness, patience, were not abstract teachings in that moment. They were lived, embodied, and resilient under trial. Khadijah's memory, ever present, lent strength. He recalled her unwavering belief, her calm guidance in the face of danger, and the quiet fortitude of Abu Talib. These memories became shields, softening the impact of cruelty while sharpening the clarity of purpose. Though the stones bruised flesh and pride, they could not touch conviction rooted in truth and patience. The day pressed on with little respite, and the city's hostility seemed absolute. The valley around Taif, fertile and green, contrasted starkly with the harshness of the human response. Muhammad moved slowly through the streets, his voice gentle but firm, seeking understanding where fear and anger predominated. Every attempt met with rejection, yet each act of patience became an emblem, demonstrating that courage was not defined solely by victory, but by endurance in the face of suffering. Even in this crucible of hostility, small gestures hinted at mercy. A few passers-by offered brief glances of sympathy, a kind word, or water carried discreetly in a hand. These moments, fleeting yet profound, reminded Muhammad that not all hearts were hardened, that compassion could exist even amidst widespread resistance. The faint glimmers of empathy, though insufficient to change the city's stance, became beacons guiding the journey forward. Eventually, Muhammad withdrew, his path taking him back toward Mecca. The rejection of Taif had been painful, a crucible of suffering, yet it had not extinguished hope. The stones that had been hurled, the insults and scorn, were recorded not as defeats, but as lessons. Patience under persecution, resilience amidst cruelty, and the quiet power of mercy. As the horizon of Mecca appeared once more, the gentle moments of kindness and the enduring strength of faith carried Muhammad onward. The city awaited, its streets heavy with scrutiny, yet home to those who still held belief and courage. Each step back toward familiar walls was a reminder that even in the harshest trials, mercy, patience, and perseverance could illuminate the path, preparing the heart for the challenges that lay ahead. Mecca lay quiet under a canopy of stars, the city's streets empty except for the occasional watchful guard or the soft rustle of a night wind. Houses slept, markets were shuttered, and the distant hum of the Kaaba's presence lent a calm rhythm to the valley. Yet beneath this apparent stillness, Muhammad sensed something extraordinary stirring, a presence that transcended the familiar world. The air itself seemed to hum with expectancy, the darkness carrying a subtle electric weight that pressed not on the body, but on the spirit. He moved quietly from his resting place, guided by instinct and a deep, unshakable calm. Every shadowed alley, every narrow street seemed to pulse with the energy of something unseen yet unmistakable. The familiar walls of the city no longer confined him. Instead, they seemed to dissolve in the awareness of a reality beyond mortal sight. Muhammad's heart beat steadily, a rhythm in harmony with the extraordinary force approaching, a force that promised both awe and responsibility. The stars above glittered with uncommon clarity, their light piercing the veil of night as though attentive to the movement below. The moon, suspended like a sentinel in the sky, cast a soft glow over the rooftops, illuminating pathways that had been familiar by day but mysterious by night. Every step forward felt deliberate, a quiet surrender to the unfolding moment. It was as if the city itself had drawn a breath, holding it in reverence, waiting for what was about to begin. Suddenly, a luminous presence appeared, delicate yet unmistakable, hovering in the space before Muhammad. Its light was soft but vivid, neither blinding nor faint, radiating calm authority and gentle assurance. Muhammad paused, senses alert, yet unafraid. He felt a connection, not bound by physicality, but by understanding, a recognition that this was the threshold of a journey unlike any other, a passage into realms of guidance and revelation that lay beyond ordinary perception. The presence did not speak in words, yet its communication was immediate and profound. Muhammad felt an understanding infused into his consciousness, that the path ahead required not only courage and patience, but also trust in what could not be fully comprehended. The luminous guide did not command, but beckoned, offering clarity and direction, illuminating a route upward, as if the very heavens had opened a doorway for his ascent. Every instinct of fear or hesitation dissolved under the weight of awe and certainty. Muhammad stepped forward, guided by the luminous presence each movement light yet purposeful, as if gravity itself had softened in recognition of the journey's sacredness. The streets of Mecca below receded, shrinking in distance and significance, while the vastness above expanded, filled with potential, wisdom, and unseen wonders. The city slept, unaware of the extraordinary event unfolding above its quiet roofs, yet the sky vibrated with significance. Stars seemed to shift in acknowledgement, constellations bending subtly toward the ascending figure. The air carried a fragrance of purity, the night wind a quiet chorus of reverence. Muhammad felt the boundaries of earthly limitation yield, replaced by a luminous guidance that elevated both spirit and consciousness. As he rose higher, the city became a distant silhouette, its familiar contours softened by shadow and moonlight. Below, Mecca's lights twinkled faintly, anchored in the ordinary, while above, a luminous reality beckoned, radiant, serene, and infinitely vast. Muhammad's heart remained steady, buoyed by faith, clarity, and the knowledge that this journey was not one of fear, but of preparation, revelation, and divine connection. Step by step, guided by the light, he moved upward into the night, leaving the ordinary world behind while carrying its hopes, fears, and prayers within him. The city slept, unaware, yet the sky did not. It shimmered, alive with the promise of what was to come, illuminating the path for a journey that would bridge the earthly and the divine. The city of Mecca shrank beneath Muhammad's feet, rooftops and alleys dissolving into the cool shadow of night. The streets were empty, the lamps extinguished, and the valley carried only the quiet hum of slumber. Yet above the sleeping Rat, the sky unfolded, vast and infinite, beckoning him forward. Guided by the luminous presence, Muhammad felt his body lifted, light as air, every earthly weight falling away until movement itself became effortless, serene, and natural. The night stretched around him, an endless expanse of stars glimmering with a clarity that seemed almost conscious, as though each point of light acknowledged his passage. The familiar boundaries of time and space dissolved. Winds whispered past in gentle currents, carrying a sense of peace that contrasted with the turbulence of mortal life below. Every heartbeat felt synchronized with the cosmos, a rhythm both ancient and immediate, binding sky, spirit, and purpose. As he traveled, the landscape beneath transformed. Deserts and valleys gave way to distant mountains, rivers shimmered faintly under the starlight, and distant settlements twinkled like clusters of tiny flames. The journey was swift yet unhurried, weightless yet purposeful. Muhammad felt neither fatigue nor fear, only the quiet awe of movement beyond human limitation. Every thought, every breath was attuned to the luminous guide who moved beside him, radiating calm authority and serene reassurance. Hours, or perhaps only moments, passed in this transcendent travel. The horizon shifted, revealing a land both distant and sacred. Jerusalem rose into view, ancient and storied, its silhouette etched against the night sky. Minarets, walls, and the dome of the rock glimmered faintly under the moon's soft glow. Muhammad's heart recognized the city, not simply for its physical presence, but for its profound spiritual weight, the convergence of centuries of devotion, prayer, and divine intention. Descending gently toward the sacred land, he felt a new sense of connection, as if the city itself were alive with unseen energy, welcoming yet reverent. The journey had carried him beyond the known, through realms that balance the tangible and the unseen, preparing him for a moment of ascent unlike any before. Each step was measured, deliberate, a conscious surrender to a purpose that transcended mortal understanding. In Jerusalem, the streets were silent, the city held in nocturnal stillness, yet the air vibrated with latent holiness. Muhammad's guide paused, and a gentle invitation filled the space, signaling that this destination was not an end, but the threshold to another stage. The serenity of the journey up to this point gave way to a focused anticipation. The city below was a foundation, the next ascent, a continuation of a path that bridged the earthly and the divine. Muhammad felt the sacred weight of history pressing subtly, not as burden, but as preparation. He thought of the prophets whose footsteps had shaped this land, their devotion echoing across generations. Their presence, though unseen, seemed tangible in the quiet streets, in the air that carried both memory and expectation. Every element of Jerusalem whispered a readiness for the journey upward, a recognition of the trials, revelations, and purpose awaiting beyond mere sight. The luminous guide turned, signaling the next movement. Muhammad's ascent began, gentle and deliberate, rising above rooftops, minarets, and the ancient stones of the city. The night embraced him, offering clarity, weightlessness, and profound serenity. He felt the continuity of the journey, from Mecca to the skies above, across lands, toward the sacred city, and now toward a celestial realm awaiting him above Jerusalem. In this suspended, ethereal space, Muhammad realized the extraordinary nature of the night's journey. It was not merely travel. It was a preparation of spirit, a communion with divine guidance, and a passage that transcended mortal understanding. The path ahead promised revelation, connection, and the illumination of knowledge far beyond what the eyes could see. And so, rising above Jerusalem, the night embraced him, the city silent and reverent below, while the heavens opened wider, ready to guide the next stage of ascent toward mysteries yet to unfold. Above Jerusalem, the night sky stretched infinitely, opening not merely into space, but into realms beyond ordinary comprehension. Muhammad rose, guided by the luminous presence, leaving the earthly city behind as the familiar weight of time and gravity dissolved. The ascent was unlike any journey of body alone. It was a passage of spirit, a movement through layers of existence that shimmered with a resonance deeper than sound, more expansive than sight. Each breath felt vast, each heartbeat aligned with the pulse of creation itself. The heavens unfolded gradually, not as a series of literal levels, but as impressions of profound peace, clarity, and proximity to the divine. Light danced in ways that had no source, radiating calm, warmth, and understanding that transcended description. Muhammad sensed not a hierarchy of angels or a catalog of celestial beings, but a weightless communion of consciousness, a harmony in which every moment carried infinite presence. The journey was symbolic, cosmic, a reflection of the inner elevation that accompanies unshakable faith. Time itself became fluid. Seconds stretched into eternity, yet eternity passed like a fleeting whisper. Muhammad felt both observer and participant, in essence attentive to the serenity surrounding him while simultaneously immersed in it. Emotions that had once felt heavy, sorrow, grief, longing, transformed into clarity and resolve. In this space, pain was understood, endurance sanctified, and the fragility of mortal existence seen in the light of infinite purpose. The luminous guide remained close, not instructing in words, but through presence alone, an unwavering reassurance that every step, every rising motion was held within divine awareness. Muhammad felt the interconnectedness of all things, the prayers of the faithful below, the struggles of the oppressed, the joys and sorrows that had shaped his own heart. These threads wove into a tapestry of understanding, a silent communication of unity, mercy, and guidance. Emotion swept through him in waves, peace so profound it seemed to cradle his spirit, awe so expansive it rendered thought secondary, humility so deep it illuminated the vastness of creation without diminishing purpose. There were no concrete forms, no images demanding interpretation, only impressions of nearness, of love, and of a reality that was both immediate and eternal. The passage was inward as much as it was outward. Muhammad perceived the layers of being not as obstacles, but as states of consciousness, each revealing the harmony, patience, and closeness of the divine. Time in this realm was not linear. Moments overlapped, feelings of transcendence and understanding unfolded simultaneously. The ascent carried neither fear nor urgency. It was a gentle unfolding, a natural rising that harmonized with every beat of the heart and every breath of the spirit. The journey through these luminous, symbolic realms became a testament to endurance, devotion, and the subtle power of trust. Trust in guidance beyond the visible. Trust in purpose beyond comprehension. Muhammad sensed that every human struggle, every act of patience, every enduring moment of faith resonated here. The emotional impressions of celestial presence offered both consolation and instruction, shaping an awareness that would remain long after descent. The serenity, the nearness, the quiet certainty of divine care imprinted itself upon the soul, leaving an enduring clarity. The world below, with its trials, was not abandoned, but part of a greater unfolding, witnessed and guided with infinite care. As dawn approached, the heavens began to soften into the first light of day. The ethereal journey gently reversed, the impressions of celestial serenity accompanying him downward. Muhammad descended toward Jerusalem, then toward Mecca, carrying with him the weightless lessons of the night, the understanding of patience, the power of inner peace, and the profound nearness of guidance that transcends time and circumstance. The city below still slept, unaware of the extraordinary journey above, yet the first light of morning promised continuity, a new day of clarity, and the quiet strength drawn from a passage beyond time. Muhammad returned to Mecca as the city stirred with the first light of dawn. The streets, already waking with merchants preparing their stalls and citizens beginning their routines, seemed unchanged. But the air carried a tension he could not ignore. The night had been extraordinary, a journey beyond comprehension. Yet he faced the familiar reality of a city steeped in doubt and suspicion. The luminous presence that had guided him faded gently into memory, leaving behind an inner clarity that contrasted sharply with the skepticism awaiting him below. He began to recount the experience to those who would listen. Abu Bakr, Khadijah's memory, and the early believers who had endured hunger, persecution, and ridicule. He spoke of the weightless ascent, the serenity of the night sky, the symbolic passage through realms unseen, and the impressions of nearness and divine presence. Every word carried awe, humility, and a sense of responsibility. Yet even as he shared, the city's response was immediate and jarring. Laughter met his words in the streets. Merchants and elders shook their heads in disbelief. Stories for children, some whispered, while others openly mocked the details, exaggerating ridicule in the hope of sowing doubt among the followers. The disbelievers dismissed the account as fantasy, as invention, as the dangerous musings of a man seeking attention or acclaim. The ridicule stung, though Muhammad bore it with patience, his calm unshaken by derision. He knew the journey had not been for recognition or applause. It had been a testament of faith, a preparation for challenges to come, and a source of strength for the believers. Yet the believers, those who had witnessed trials alongside him and endured hardships in Mecca and beyond, felt a quiet but profound reinforcement. Though others mocked, their hearts held certainty that could not be measured by laughter or disbelief. The night journey had illuminated not merely celestial realms, but the steadfastness of faith itself. Abu Bakr, standing near him, placed a hand on his shoulder with quiet assurance. "We have seen enough to know the truth," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of unwavering conviction. In whispered circles and private homes, believers reflected on the journey, sharing impressions rather than proof, knowing that certainty was not rooted in spectacle, but in experience, endurance, and trust in what could not always be shown. The ridicule outside became inconsequential in comparison to the strengthening of spirit within. Hearts were fortified, courage renewed, and the understanding of divine guidance deepened. The night journey was not simply a vision, it was a source of resolve, a compass pointing through trials toward patience, unity, and resilience. Despite this inner strength, the city of Mecca remained hostile. The Quraysh increased their scrutiny, monitoring followers and whispering warnings through allies and family connections. Merchants refused assistance, families turned their backs, and ridicule occasionally gave way to threats. The calm certainty gained from the night journey did not erase the practical realities of opposition. Every street, every marketplace, and every public gathering carried reminders of danger, tension, and the precariousness of being a believer in a city dominated by doubt and fear. Muhammad and his followers began to recognize the limits of patience within a city so unwilling to embrace change. The strength derived from the celestial journey, the endurance through boycott, and the courage of early believers now faced a practical question: how to preserve life, faith, and community in the face of rising hostility. The thought of migration emerged gradually, not as surrender, but as strategic wisdom, a means to continue the mission, protect the vulnerable, and ensure that faith could grow safely beyond the confines of Mecca. The city mocked, the threats grew, yet the believer's certainty remained unshaken. The experiences of the night journey and the trials endured had forged a community resilient enough to face a turning point. Hostility would not be ignored, and the notion of leaving, of seeking refuge, alliance, and protection took root, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the unfolding story of perseverance, faith, and divine guidance. The streets of Mecca grew increasingly oppressive, though the city itself seemed unaware of the quiet plans stirring within shadowed homes and hidden gatherings. The ridicule, the threats, and the watchful eyes of the Quraysh weighed heavily on the believers, reminding them that patience alone could no longer ensure safety or the growth of their faith. Within small, trusted circles, hushed voices began to speak of a distant city, a place whose people were known for fairness, hospitality, and openness, a city called Yathrib. Muhammad listened intently as followers described the whispers they had heard from merchants, travelers, and allies who had recently visited the northern settlements. Yathrib, they said, was home to clans weary of internal conflict and eager for guidance and unity. Its leaders sought a figure capable of mediating disputes and inspiring faith that could transcend tribal rivalries. Some voices carried hope, others skepticism, but all shared a common understanding. The city might provide refuge, a place where belief could flourish without fear of persecution. In these clandestine meetings, held behind closed doors or in quiet courtyards shielded from prying eyes, Muhammad weighed the possibilities carefully. The night journey had strengthened his resolve. The trials of Taif and the boycott had tested endurance, and the unwavering courage of his followers had proven the durability of their faith. Yet the path to Yathrib required caution, planning, and discretion. Every word spoken carried risk, every listener potential danger or ally. The whispers of hijrah, migration, were both hopeful and urgent, a lifeline threaded through the tension of the city. The early believers felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief, because the prospect of Yathrib promised safety and the opportunity to establish a community free from immediate hostility. Apprehension, because leaving Mecca meant abandoning familiar streets, family ties, and ancestral lands. The tension of this decision was tempered by trust in Muhammad's guidance and the quiet knowledge that divine providence had carried them through greater trials. Every whisper, every subtle plan, became part of the mosaic of preparation, binding the believers together with purpose and resolve. Abu Bakr, ever vigilant and steadfast, assisted in these secret discussions, offering counsel and reassurance. "We must plan carefully," he reminded the group, "for our journey is not only a test of faith, but a responsibility to those who follow." Khadija's absence was felt keenly. Her wisdom and courage had guided them through previous hardships. Yet the memory of her resolve lingered, lending strength to decisions made in shadowed corners of the city. Word of Yathrib spread cautiously, carried by trusted messengers and discreet conversations. Small delegations were dispatched under the cover of night, moving quietly through valleys and trade routes to assess the city's reception, gauge the sincerity of its leaders, and explore practical arrangements for those who would soon depart. Each return brought stories of cautious optimism. Leaders and clans eager to provide protection, families willing to host, and a sense that the migration could be accomplished without immediate danger if executed with care. The believers gathered to share reports, adjust plans, and strengthen one another's resolve. The whispers of Hijra were no longer abstract hope. They were becoming a tangible path, a lifeline out of Mecca's hostility and toward a future of safety and spiritual growth. Every conversation reinforced the understanding that preparation was essential. Timing, secrecy, and coordination would determine the success of the journey. Finally, the arrival of scouts confirmed what whispers alone could not. Yathrib's leaders were indeed willing to welcome Muhammad and his followers. Their messages carried assurances of protection and guidance, and the believers recognized that the time for careful planning had become urgent. Preparations must begin, supplies gathered, routes scouted, and the community readied for the migration that would mark a new chapter in their collective journey of faith, endurance, and resilience. The whispers of Hijra, once faint and fragile, had crystallized into purpose. The city of Yathrib, distant yet promising, awaited, a sanctuary for belief, a stage for guidance, and the next step in a journey shaped by trials, endurance, and unwavering trust. The city of Mecca slept under a heavy, quiet darkness, its streets empty, its markets shuttered, and its watchful eyes lulled into slumber by the stillness of night. Yet within this calm, a tension lingered, invisible to most, as if the city itself sensed the weight of a moment it could not comprehend. Muhammad moved silently through the shadowed alleys, Abu Bakr at his side, their footsteps muffled against the familiar stones. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of distant sand and the faint aroma of cooking fires long extinguished. The departure had been planned with meticulous care. Every detail, from the timing of departure to the routes through hidden passages, had been calculated to avoid detection by the Quraysh, whose hostility had intensified with each passing day. The two companions carried only what was necessary: provisions for the journey, garments to shield against the chill of desert nights, and the quiet knowledge that their mission demanded courage greater than fear. Each step forward was deliberate, yet the weight of leaving home, of abandoning streets, markets, and kin, pressed upon them both with silent gravity. As they passed familiar homes, Muhammad could feel the eyes of memory watching him. Khadijah's absence, the guidance of Abu Talib now gone, and the familiar faces of neighbors and friends lingered in the shadows of thought. The city had been a crucible of trials, a place where ridicule, persecution, and doubt had sharpened both faith and resolve. Yet tonight, the same city slept unaware that history was turning beneath the cloak of darkness. The path out of Mecca led them through narrow alleyways and across rooftops, places known only to trusted companions and shadowed guides. Every moment demanded alertness. Every sound, a distant dog, a shifting gate, a whisper of wind, could signal danger. Yet Muhammad moved with calm assurance, his trust unshaken, his faith a quiet lantern, illuminating the path forward. Abu Bakr, steady and vigilant, mirrored this composure, carrying the responsibility of protecting both the messenger and the mission. For the early believers, this night was the embodiment of hope mingled with fear. The departure was necessary, yet perilous. The city's hostility had grown, and the Quraysh were vigilant, anticipating defiance at every turn. Every hidden corner, every shadowed street reminded them that their survival and the continuity of faith depended upon discretion, courage, and steadfastness. Muhammad's resolve became a guide, not only in movement, but in spirit, inspiring confidence that the journey, though dangerous, was ordained and purposeful. As they passed the city walls, the gates, behind them, silent and unguarded, the night widened into the open desert. The familiar streets and homes of Mecca faded, replaced by the expanse of sand, rock, and horizon. Stars glittered overhead, seemingly attentive to the unfolding events, their cold light softened by the warmth of purpose and destiny. Muhammad breathed deeply, feeling the shift from constrained city streets to the freedom of the desert road, a space where steps forward could be measured only by faith and perseverance. The night stretched on, carrying them through valleys and across faint trails, every movement deliberate and hushed. Each hour passed with tension and anticipation, yet the calm of the night, the weightlessness of purpose, and the quiet companionship of Abu Bakr lent strength to each step. Though the desert was vast and unknown, it offered sanctuary from immediate danger, a bridge toward safety, and a canvas upon which new beginnings could unfold. As the city of Mecca receded behind them, silent and unaware, the desert road opened ahead, endless in its promise and challenge. Muhammad and Abu Bakr moved forward, the night embracing them, the stars guiding them, and the first whispers of a new chapter stirring within their hearts. History was in motion, unseen by those who slept, yet profound in its unfolding. A migration that would shape faith, community, and destiny for generations to come. The desert road stretched ahead, dark yet illuminated by resolve, carrying the travelers toward new beginnings, safety, and a future beyond the familiar confines of the city they had left behind. The desert stretched endlessly beneath the night sky, a tapestry of shifting dunes and distant stars. Each step along the Hijra path was deliberate, measured, and laden with both caution and hope. Muhammad moved steadily, Abu Bakr at his side, their feet pressing into soft sand, leaving faint impressions that would soon vanish with the morning wind. The journey was not only physical, but spiritual. Each mile carrying the weight of exile, the courage of the believers, and the promise of a new beginning. The night was cool, yet the desert radiated a quiet warmth, as if the earth itself recognized the sacredness of the migration. Stars glimmered overhead, not merely as distant lights, but as witnesses to perseverance, to faith, and to a journey that transcended ordinary understanding. Every rustle of sand, every whisper of the wind seemed attuned to the travelers, carrying subtle reassurance that the path forward, though uncertain, was guided and protected. Conversations were few, each step accompanied by the unspoken rhythm of endurance. Muhammad's mind held memories of Mecca, the ridicule, the threats, the loss of Khadijah and Abu Talib, the night journey that had lifted him above mortal concerns. These memories, once heavy with grief and struggle, now flowed alongside the steady pulse of hope, shaping resolve into a quiet, luminous determination. Abu Bakr mirrored this calm vigilance, offering companionship, support, and unwavering protection along the shifting path of dunes. As the night deepened, the desert seemed to open beneath them, expanding the horizon and amplifying the significance of their journey. Every shadowed ridge, every curve in the sand, carried the tension of uncertainty, yet also the clarity of purpose. Muhammad's heart was steady, every thought attuned to the mission, every breath synchronized with the rhythm of endurance, courage, and trust. The world behind them, the city of Mecca with its hostility and familiarity, receded into memory, while the world ahead promised sanctuary, understanding, and the opportunity for belief to thrive. Hours passed, the darkness gradually softening as the first hints of dawn began to glow on the horizon. Faint shapes emerged, groves of palms, clusters of homes, and the gentle rise of Medina's hills. The city's presence was subtle at first, whispered along the horizon, yet it grew with every step, a tangible promise of shelter, of acceptance, and of the chance to rebuild community free from immediate persecution. Muhammad felt a profound sense of recognition, as though the land itself welcomed the travelers, acknowledging the courage, patience, and faith that had carried them across deserts and through danger. The early believers who had followed in secret, scattered across the dunes in careful coordination, began to catch glimpses of the city as well. Their hearts lifted, courage renewed, and spirits strengthened by the certainty that this migration was not simply escape. It was a turning point, a passage into a space where belief could flourish, where community could grow, and where purpose could take root in safety. The palm groves, the gentle hum of awakening life, and the orderly clusters of homes became symbols of hope realized and trials endured. Every step closer to Medina was infused with the memory of Mecca's hardships and the wisdom gained through endurance. The journey, though physically demanding, became a meditation in movement, faith manifest in motion, courage reflected in each silent stride, and hope embodied in the distant light of a city poised to receive the travelers with understanding and welcome. The desert, once vast and isolating, now seemed like a bridge, connecting the trials of the past with the promise of renewal. As Medina's groves grew nearer, the world felt changed. Not only the city itself, but the hearts of those who had traveled across sand and night. The migration had transformed them, strengthened their resolve, and crystallized their faith. Every shadow, every star, every breath of wind carried the affirmation that the journey was divinely guided, and that the road, though arduous, had led them to a sanctuary where belief could flourish. The path into the city opened softly, a gentle invitation to begin anew. The desert behind, them, the sky above still stretching vast and infinite, Muhammad and his companions stepped toward Medina, hearts lifted, spirits lightened, and the promise of peace and continuity awaiting in the welcoming palm groves. The story of the journey, of endurance, faith, and courage, drew to a close as the horizon brightened, leaving the listener with the quiet resonance of hope, resilience, and the soft assurance that even in the trials of the world, light awaits those who walk with steadfast hearts.